On this episode, we debate how, or even if, living overseas changes who you are and how you see the world.
If Bangkok holds a special place in your heart, your head, or your spleen, or whatever organ that you use to cogitate, you'll enjoy this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and has remained so ever since.
And I am Evo Terra, no bushes, no tails, an American expat living full-time in Bangkok since the beginning of 2016. Thanks for joining us here in the Big Mango.
So today we're going to be talking about how being an expat, how it does or does not change who you are. But before we start, let's give a shout out to one of our supporters on Patreon who help keep the show free of ads.
Yes, another one of those today. And this week, the gentleman's name is Moss Minor.
Now, as you know, Evo, I do like to do some research on our patrons just to make sure they're not nutbags. And I found out something interesting about Moss. Mm-hmm. Well, it's more about what he didn't do than what he did do. Now, Moss was named after his uncle, you see, but it turns out Uncle Moss was kind of a jerk. In fact, Uncle Moss was such a jerk that back in 1976, he really was a big bully to his girlfriend's nerdy brother, George. You follow me?
Yeah, I'm following you.
I mean, Uncle Moss was really giving this guy the gears. Poor George here. It was really so bad that George used Uncle Moss's name in a movie he wrote. Now get this. This is where it's all tied together. George's last name, Lucas. The movie, Star Wars. Uncle Moss's full name, Moss Isley, which, as we all know, was the wretched hive of scum and villainy that Luke meets Han and Chewie at on Tatooine. So our Moss heard this story and is such a decent, nice, honest guy, he changed his name to avoid any confusion with his bully uncle. So now he's simply Moss Minor, who has chosen the light side of the Force rather than the dark. So good on you, Moss, and thanks for your support.
Dumb. To help support the show, to get access to additional exclusive full episodes, and to load up on a bunch of cool swag, also get Greg to make up goofy things like this about you, you can get signed up at patreon.com/Bangkok Podcast. Now, with all of that silliness out of the way, can we finally talk about how being an expat either does or does not change who you are?
Well, we'll get to that in a minute, but first, I want to talk about our adventure last week. You remember? Evo, you and I headed out into Bangkok's dusty, hot suburbs on the weekend to track down the special gifts that we're going to be giving out to patrons of our gift box level. Now, we stuck ourselves in the back of an Uber, pointed northwest, I guess it was.
Ish.
And we drove out to find these pretty cool gifts. What did you think of them? Because it was the first time that you saw them.
Yeah, I thought they were amazing. And I thought the little area we were at was also cool. It wasn't my first time being there, as I explained to you, but it's one of those situations where, like everything in Bangkok, if you just go a little further, there's something really cool around the corner. Because Sheila and I had been to this area a year before and walked down the very same street, and as we're walking down, you're taking me to this place, and I'm thinking, there's nothing here. It's a cool little spot. You know, it's 3 inches wide. They call it a road, and we're going down it. But there's nothing of interest down here. And then almost 20 meters after Sheila and I stopped and turned around, making that realization, you take me to this cool artisan crafts place, which is like, I walked a little further, I could have seen these real cool things in actions a year ago. But no, it took you taking me down, and it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, now we're not going to say what these gifts are because we want to maintain the element of surprise, but they are pretty cool, and we're going to look into getting them a little bit personalized for the Bangkok Podcast. And I think they're really cool. They're really beautiful. They're really unique, and they're handmade. That's all I'm going to say. So.
And this is not like handmade as in somebody laid a T-shirt and hand-printed a Chong logo on it. No,
these are handmade, like serious, like you said, artisans, not just silk screeners.
Yeah, right. And this is pretty hardcore. And yeah, we're gonna get some video of these things in the crafting process as well to really tempt you. So if you have not yet signed up to become a patron and are on our gift box level, you're gonna want this. This is really amazing. We're gonna have extras made, at least one for you and one for me, because these things are wicked, awesome, and cool. Hey, also before we jump into the full program, don't forget November the 29th, 2017, in the event that you're listening to this in the future. Yeah, I guess that'd be the future. We're having our big I Love Podcasting in Bangkok meetup part 2, part song, at Smalls on Suam Plu. It's actually on Soy 1 on Suam Plu. Smalls, a very popular bar. We have the entire third floor reserved for us and other fans of podcasting. So you can meet the two of us. You can meet some of the other guys. Currently, I only know of guys in Bangkok that also do podcasting, and then lots of fans will be coming out of not of just our show, like you, fine listener, but also of some of the other podcasts that are produced here in Bangkok. So if you're curious to see us and the other people and get to hang out with other cool, like-minded people, go to our Facebook page, Bangkok Podcast Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Bangkok Podcast, and RSVP for the event so we can get a good head count. We'll be on the third floor. The entire one is reserved for us. The entire floor is ours. On the 29th of November. We hope to see you there.
I do want to give a quick shout out to my friend Nikki, who does have a podcast in Bangkok. So she is the only girl I know who does a podcast. But yeah.
Well, there we go. Will she be there?
She said it looked interesting. I'm not sure yet. She's pretty busy, so we'll see how it goes.
All right.
But this episode we want to talk about, like we said, how living overseas changes you as a person. And it stems from a discussion that you and I were having while we were stuck in the back of the aforementioned Uber on the way to find our Patreon gifts. And that discussion was, how much does living overseas change you as a person? And not just how does it make you miss home, or how does it make you learn new things? I mean, those are sort of givens, but how does it reorient your social compass? How does it change the way you digest information and interact with other people, be they your friends, your family, or complete strangers? So we got to talking about it a little bit, and we were of two minds, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was pretty clear very quickly during this conversation that we did not have the same opinion. And so we tabled the discussion and said we should probably do this more with microphones in our hands at the studio, or at the studios, if you will, so that you people could experience it. So find out where you fall on this spectrum and see if you agree with me or the guy who's wrong. You get the pick.
It's funny. Our friendship is mostly based around being silent, because every time we start having an interesting conversation, we're like, let's talk about this on the podcast.
That's life as a podcaster, man. That's my life for 14 years. Imagine being married to your wife and also do a podcast together as we do. It's like, no, honey, we can't talk about this now. We have to wait for Saturday.
So I was saying that, yes, obviously living overseas changes you in a very deep and meaningful way, but you said maybe not so much. You were a little bit wish-washy on the whole thing.
Yeah, well, I think I'm more than wish-washy about that. So my perspective, you'll remember, comes from my immersion into the travel blogging community that I stumbled into by accident in 2015. And I made some fantastic friends in the travel blogging community. I don't mean to disparage them, at least not individually, at all, but many of my friends who are hardcore travel bloggers who love this, they're big interviewers of people. They want to talk to other people who travel the world and learn about them. And it is a very common refrain from all of those shows that these people are wanting to talk to other travelers because they have all experienced collectively the transformative nature of travel. And I've been interviewed for some of these podcasts and these blogs that are about travel. And I'm almost always asked that question: how has it changed you as a person? And here's the reality, people. It hasn't. I don't notice any change. To me, there was no transformative. I can't look back at the guy that I was before I left America 3 years ago to who I am now. I'm still that same person. And so for me, I think it's all bullcrap personally. I just don't feel change.
So that's not to say that you haven't learned anything
No, completely not. Yeah, I've learned a lot. I mean, it broadened my horizons. I've seen more things. I've experienced more. I mean, that was the whole reason I did leave, was because I wanted to have more and exciting experiences. But am I transformed? Have I emerged from my chrysalis where I was but a caterpillar and now I am a beautiful butterfly or maybe just a moth? No. But that was because that's the kind of guy I was originally. I'm the kind of person that seeks out new experiences. I dig change, and so for me, I don't notice it.
Had you done much traveling up until the time you actually left full time in the United States or into Mexico, Canada, or other countries?
Yeah, I mean, my first real job in college that wasn't waiting tables or cleaning up other people waiting tables. I wasn't good enough to wait tables. I was an effing busboy. Was working at this crazy company that did these big presentations all around the country. And so I would go to school half-assed. I mean, let's face it, I wasn't the greatest student. And then I would go work in the evenings. And then Friday night, I would load up a big box van full of projectors and sound equipment and screens and all the things we need to do, and then drive that truck from the middle of America to crazy places like Hagerstown, Maryland, of all horrible places, and set up and do these big conferences for 3 or 4 days, meeting people from all around, and then climb back in the truck, go back to Norman, Oklahoma, and then rinse and repeat. I mean, I probably have seen 40 states by truck, by driving to these places and meeting people from other areas and occasionally flying to places. So yeah, I traveled a lot within the States from like 19. I did that for a solid 3 years. So yeah, lots and lots of travel.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much the same culture, give or take. So I guess that's not really the same as traveling overseas. But I wonder if that really makes a difference, because when I grew up, like I think I famously said before, not famously, but I've said on the podcast, I think
That's famous.
I once met a guy from Mexico in my hometown, and that was really neat. So I was pretty sheltered, and I didn't travel a lot, even in Canada. So I wonder if that makes a difference.
I think it probably does have a lot to do with that. You and I both grew up in the sticks of our relative country, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you grew up in
Farm boy.
I was a farm boy as well, and I graduated with 27 people in my high school class. It was a farming community is what we did, and I know that probably on the order of 80% of the people that I went to high school with still live in that exact same town, or could drive to that town for lunch and then drive back to their place in time for the end of lunch, right? I mean, they're very, very close. They did not move far away. And I knew from an early age that was not in the cards for me. I left, I went to college, I then moved to the real big town, Dallas, Texas, and then promptly, as soon as Sheila and I had a kid at 4 months, we moved to Los Angeles. Started a life over there. I started working there. I worked in New York City, went back to Phoenix, Arizona, started traveling. So I guess maybe it's, I shouldn't say that there is no transformative nature or transformative power of living overseas. It's just, I didn't get it because I might be the weirdo. I might be the one who was destined to do this kind of stuff, regardless of whether I'm overseas or just traveling around a lot at home, or maybe not traveling a lot. Maybe that was just who I am. I don't know.
Well, the first time it ever became very clear to me was when I went home with my then girlfriend, now wife. We went back to Canada in 2008, and I'm from Calgary, Alberta, which is a big city. Well, it's right now it's probably 1.5 million. A rich city in a rich province, oil money, oil. It's basically, Alberta is like the Texas of Canada. So there's cowboys and rednecks and cows and rodeos and all that crap, but. I was talking Calgary up to my girlfriend so much. Oh, this is a great place. It's a cool, funky place. It's got so much vitality and character and color. And man, we got there and I was like embarrassed. And, if you're Calgarian or a friend of mine and you're listening to this, sorry, but my wife was kind of looking around like, is this it? And then we went, oh, you got to go down to Eau Claire Market. It's like this hub of activity. And we went down there. There was like 9 people sitting around smoking. And stores were closed. Oh, you got to go to Stephen Avenue Mall. There's buskers and all these kind of cool things. And we went to Stephen Avenue Mall. There was no one there, and it was just really gray and drab and dull. And I'm thinking like, well, what changed? Like Calgary didn't change. My friends are like, yeah, it's kind of slowed down a little bit, but it's not really like it's always the same. And I realized that just my eyes had been opened so much
Yeah.
from living in this insane city like Bangkok. To go back to a place like Calgary is like going from, it's like going from the top floor of a skyscraper moving into a basement, one bedroom.
Sure. Yeah.
So that was the first time it became very clear to me that I had changed just from living overseas, and I couldn't look at my old life, my old friends, my old experiences the same way because they had been tainted in the best way possible.
And so maybe in your case, it was the act of getting the hell out that precipitated those big changes to cause you to examine things you hadn't had cause to examine before, to look back and say, you stayed there, because you're talking 2008 is when you went back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you had been in Thailand for 7 years. You'd been in Bangkok for a good, all of that time, or just most of that time in Bangkok?
Most of that time.
Most of that time in Bangkok, right? So, which is, unless you live in Manhattan, Hong Kong, Tokyo, Singapore, or one of the other true cosmopolitan cities of the world. I wouldn't even say Vancouver cuts it, right?
Was that a Canadian accent you tried to slip in there?
How'd I do? Did I do okay with Vancouver?
Not bad. Vancouver. That's pretty good.
I probably drug it out a little longer than I should have, but just wanted to make sure everybody got it. I speak Canadian the same way I speak Thai. Anyhow, unless you have been from one of those places, you're going to see and experience things at a different level. So sure, the first time that I went to Manhattan and spent 3 weeks there for the company that I was working for, that was eye-opening. I now understand, or I understood, at least I thought that I understood, what it meant to live in a cosmopolitan city. And of course, now I got 3 years here, and I've spent some time in Hong Kong, and so I've seen what that is. Like, oh, right, that's what this means. And it's not just big. LA was a big city, but it's not international. It's not a true, a continental city, an international, true cosmopolitan city as the other ones are. So that's if that was your first experience, that's definitely going to change a perspective and cause you to go, aha, I get it, because it's not just being in a big place. It's being in a very, very different place. But let me ask you this question. That's living in Bangkok. Mm-hmm. Now, try and play devil's advocate for a moment here. Let's say you're that small town Canadian or, kid that lives in Calgary, whatever. And instead of Bangkok, you wind up in a place like, I don't know, Koh Tao for 7 years, which would be rough. But nonetheless, let's, there, or somewhere else, somewhere in, I don't know, let's say Hua Hin or some other little Thai area that's not Bangkok proper. Do you think you would have had the same transformative experience in the small town version, just being in a different country?
Right. So a small town in a strange culture versus a huge city in a strange culture.
Right.
It's hard to say for sure, but I imagine so. I mean, things like Bangkok's infrastructure, that doesn't change me. I've seen sky trains and skyscrapers and big parks and things like that before. It's just the mishmash of cultures and the energy and the languages. And I imagine I would get a lot of those from Hua Hin or Koh Tao or some other little town in the middle of Vietnam or somewhere. Mm-hmm. It's hard to say for sure, but I think, yes, I think I would still end up feeling much the same changes that I have living in Bangkok.
And maybe it's when I hear my friends talk about the transformative nature of travel, it's not, oh, I went to Cancun and for 2 weeks and come back a totally changed person, right? That's just because you drank too much. I mean, let's face it. That's really all that's going to be. But maybe for them, it is because, look, I've been traveling for 6 months and I've been to 14 different countries and I'm seeing the world for the first time, and it's really taken the blinders off of my eyes. It's causing me to go back and reevaluate my position on this planet, let alone my universe.
Right.
That helps me get now there's a bigger there's a bigger piece there. And yeah, if you grew up in a real sheltered area and you didn't have a lot of exposure to those sorts of things before, getting out and seeing the world likely will cause a big change with you. But again, back to me, and I don't want to make this all about me. I just want to play the counterpoint here. I'm the kind of guy that seeks out change, not to the point to where I create a whole bunch of chaos inside of my life so that it's more destructive than that.
But the Joker.
Yeah, that would be kind of fun, wouldn't it? Anyhow, but let's not do that. It didn't work out so well for Mr. Ledger. Anyhow, so that's just me. I'm the one that seeks out new and exciting, interesting things to do, even if they are in a little tiny town. But I know that a lot of people need that push. So I'm certainly not knocking it. I mean, the opposite is not true. Actually, I think the opposite actually is true. There are people who travel the world and say, why in the hell did I ever leave? Let me go back. Or they travel to Bangkok and they say, I really wish I could go back, but I've run out of money there. So now I'm forced to be a bitchy bar stool sitting on Sukhumvit 18 for the rest of my life. That's a miserable experience. So I'm not saying you should do that. Just that if you think you need travel to change you, maybe you do. But if you're the kind of person that really relishes in change and exciting and new things anyhow, you're probably going to enjoy the hell out of travel. I enjoy it. Don't get me wrong. I love living abroad. But, if I show back up at my high school reunion, which I'm never, ever going to do, but if I did, you would still recognize me as that same asshat you knew from the late 80s.
Right. And it's interesting you mentioned some people just that travel and they don't like it. And this is, I'm looking at the notes I made for this episode. And one of the things, you didn't get notes? Oh, man. Suddenly, back in high school again, suddenly the roles are reversed, except I'm the guy that does all the work for the group and you're the guy that just coasts along on my coattails.
I love it.
But, I came over here with my best friend, Mark, and Mark doesn't listen to the podcast. And I don't think actually any of my friends who know Mark listen to the podcast, so I can talk about it. I've known Mark since I was 14 years old. We were best friends. We were roommates for many years, and we came over here together. And we were supposed to be here for 4 months, and Mark left after 12 days because the idea of being overseas and actually being overseas were very different. He loved the idea, but actually doing it was very different, and it wasn't comfortable for him. And he didn't like the food, and he didn't like the stray dogs, and he hated the tuk-tuk drivers. You. And I think at the end he was just like, the hell with this. I'm going back. Yeah. And that's one way that I've changed in the years that I've lived overseas, is that I have become way more confident, because moving to a strange city in a culture you don't understand, in a weird country on the other side of the planet, that is not easy. And I'm proud of what I've done. Like, I came over here literally with a backpack and $2,000. And I've been here 16 years. I have way less than $2,000. My backpack's a bit nicer, but I do have a wife and a kid and a condo. So I guess it's, trading in. But I'm proud of that. It's not easy, and not everyone can do that, like Mark. And nothing against the guy. He's still my very close friend, but it gave me a huge injection of confidence. Like, man, if I can do this, like, I can do anything. I don't need to be scared of traveling. I don't need to be anchored to home. I don't need to be worried about what's going to happen next, because I've already done all that.
And you should be proud of making that move and making it work. The great thing about the way that you did it is you have that safety net. Just traveling, not deciding to go be an expat. And that wasn't your intention when you left. You were just going to come to travel, right? You were coming here to see what it was like. Yeah. And the default plan was, we're done now, I go back home.
Yes,
but
exactly.
You decided to break out of that default, which I applaud you for 100%. But your friend Mark,
or ran out of money,
whichever it happens to be. But your friend Mark, took the default plan and said, I'm, just let this play. He actually exercised that a little early, perhaps, then bailed quickly on that one, and so not quite the total default, right? And so you said, oh my, this is something I actually want to do. Again, not to make this all about me, but when Sheila and I left, it was a little different. We weren't, young people when we took off. We'd already raised a child. We sold everything that we had and said, we're throwing everything into this idea of not knowing where we're going to wind up. This was not the plan to be in
Right.
Bangkok. We didn't have coming to Thailand we had no list. We knew we were going to Europe. We knew we were going to France, and that was it. We didn't know where the next stop was going to be. So for us, the default was, okay, well, that didn't work out. Let's go back to America and start over again, which wouldn't be difficult for the skill set the two of us bring to the table. But instead, we wound up here doing this, and we had the same thing. We had the very real fear that, we love to travel. The longest we've been gone has been 3 weeks before. Went to the Dominican for 3 weeks and stayed in a all-inclusive luxury resort, which is not quite the same thing as traveling. Exactly. You're right. And we knew that. We were well understood that about ourselves, that we hadn't really experienced the real life. So it was a greater than zero chance that this thing would wind up with us being right back home. But for us, it didn't. And I guess if it changed us in any way, it just affirmed what we thought, that we can make it pretty much anywhere. Not to quote from any New York songs or anything like that, but it actually works. So hooray, surprise, maybe, or okay, good news. We didn't have to fall back on the plan of going back home yet. At least it seems that we're able to do this. So. Yeah, I guess if there's a transformation, a change there, it just was more of an affirmation, I guess, than a change for us.
And you don't have to apologize for making the topic of conversation all about you. Half the reason why we started a podcast is because we both like hearing our voices, so it is all about us.
I guess that's true, right? And you person out there listening right now, it's your fault. You are supporting our egos. You keep listening, man. If you didn't want us to do it, I suppose we wouldn't talk about it any longer.
Well, speaking of one of my friends, and this is something that I've been thinking about over the past few years too, because as I've been keeping up with events back home, and my very good friends, my very close friends who I've known for most of my life, on Facebook and chatting with them and things like this, they're all, not all, but a lot of them have very conservative values. And I don't think I ever really considered myself a conservative person, but we grew up in the same culture. We went to the same schools. We had the same friends and experiences. But I am much more liberal in the ways I look at just things, cheesy things like social justice and feminism and things like that. And, I've gotten into arguments with friends and friends of friends about global warming and celebrity culture and conspiracy theories and how everyone should have guns and stuff like that,
Sure.
I don't remember having these conversations when I was younger. Now, being much younger, I'm not sure I necessarily would have these conversations. But now that I'm older and jaded, there's a lot of things that my friends and I don't see eye to eye on anymore. And I don't know if that's just because we grew apart or if it's because I've changed from where I am. But I'm leaning toward that because just my experiences, the things I've seen, the people I've talked to have made me realize just how unbelievably luxurious our lifestyle back in first world countries is, and how lucky we are and how much we take for granted. And, like I always say, and this is something I'm going to drill into my son's head, if you can wake up in the morning and put on a pair of shoes, you're doing better than half the people in the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's an attitude that a lot of people, a lot of my friends back home anyway, just never think or thought about.
No,
I certainly didn't.
And there's no reason why they actually would, because for them, it's the same all the time. I'm not sure if it's a conservative versus a progressive or a liberal versus
those might be the wrong words.
No, I agree. Sure, yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. I don't know that is the right way. I think I know the direction that you're going, and I think it's this. Once you see more than what you've grown up with, once your bubble bursts and you see additional things, here's the way I think about it. It's very difficult to live it as an expat or to be a lifetime traveler and have a deep-seated sense of nationalism. That starts to look a little weirder to you when you're no longer tied to a single nation. It just becomes much harder to be a hardcore nationalist. That doesn't mean you don't love your home country or your adopted country or anything like that. It just means that when I see conversations the way that I see conversations now inside of social media that are all centered around political national posturing, it's very difficult for me to engage. I probably would have engaged just 3 years ago because I was seeped in that culture. So if maybe I have changed in the fact that I don't jump into political fray as much as I used to, because now it's like, oh, right, that's just one of 193 different ways of living.
Right. And when you see someone tooting the nationalist horn, which you sometimes still do, I mean, back in the day, I might have gotten my hackles up, like, how dare you? How dare you say grow defensive or offensive or whatever, or argumentative.
Right.
But now you're just looking at the guy like, dude, like, who cares? What you're saying doesn't matter. You don't matter. In the big scheme of things, in the big scheme of this entire world that we're putting ourselves out into, like your dumb little attitude just gets lost like yelling into a hurricane.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I'm thinking about it now. I'm treating the nationalistic fervor the way I treat religion, and it's like, just abandon it. You don't have to not believe, that's not the case at all. But, this idea that you're this extreme attachment to one particular thought process that the vast majority of every other human on the globe doesn't buy into. Well, maybe there's something to say with that too.
Yeah. And taking that thought too, another one of my notes here is something that I've really come to see very clearly was just how much crap I don't care about anymore. Stuff that was very important to me back in Canada. Now that I just could not care less about. And the things that spring to mind immediately are celebrity culture and television. And back in town, like back in the day, my life was organized around I got to be home to watch TV. And of course, granted, this was way before set-top boxes and Netflix and all this stuff. So a slightly different situation. But I just, I have a couple of TV shows and I'll watch them or I won't watch them or whatever. And that's fine. But I see the celebrity culture that goes on in Western countries. And I'm just like, you see these TVs shows that are just like celebrity children underwater chef or whatever these stupid shows are. And people are going insane for them. And you're like, this doesn't matter. This doesn't matter at all.
Right.
And, just detach. And I don't miss it at all.
Yeah, it's that popular, whatever is popular and hip and happening now, and it does mean a lot less. That also just because we're no longer kids, right? So eventually that fades away. But I think if it's a part of an age situation, but I think it is also part of being exposed to another culture whose pop icons we're not going to get. Ever. You will get exposed to more of them as young K-Dog continues to grow up and jump into his own cultural flair, because there's no way to avoid it. It's going to happen to him as well. And you'll roll your eyes and shake it off, but it'll be a whole lot easier now because you'll literally have no idea what the hell he's talking about.
That's a good point, because
so alien.
Maybe this attitude that I have is not so much because, or part of it is not because of me. Basically, it's because I just simply can't access the celebrity culture in Thailand. Like if I spoke fluent Thai and listened to the music and watched the TV, maybe I would have more of an interest in it. But I guess as a foreigner, as an expat in a country where you don't speak the language, you can't absorb what's around you. You can't overhear the TV station or the radio or what people are talking about. So you put yourself in this little box, and it's hard for things to get in unless you choose to let them in.
Yeah, we're insulated from the culture. We're not the culture, but the popular culture.
Yeah,
we're insulated from, to some degree, the politics, the economic posturing. There's a certain amount we just don't get because we're not Thai. We don't get that. And I think it's doubly for you because you were full. Not only did you have to follow pop culture and politics in Canada, you had to do the same thing for America. Where, see, me, I didn't even know Canada had politics.
Yeah, well, for a country that just got the VCR in 1987, it's pretty cool.
All right, well, let's stop talking like old men now.
No, but I did want to say, like, there's a fine line between what we were talking about and also how we were talking about it, and becoming, get off my lawn, damn kids.
Right.
Back in my day, we had good TV shows and stuff. So I don't know where that line is. Maybe I crossed it already. I don't know.
I don't think you did. I'm relatively certain both of us stayed on the other side of it. Hopefully we will continue to check each other from doing that, because that's one of the things I want to be that curmudgeonly old bastard, but I don't want to be the one that throws rocks because their kids are walking on their lawn. So I want to be the nut job, but not the crotchety, because if I ever say back in my day, you have permission to hit me. If I ever say that, you can smack me, and you're much larger than me. So anyhow, let's transition off of, I don't have a good segue, so I'm just going to say it's time for everyone's favorite segment of the show, Love, Loathe, or Leave, where we look at one minor aspect of living in Bangkok and find out if it's something the two of us love about living in Bangkok, loathe about expat life, or if it's something we hate so much that it just might cause us to leave Thailand. This week, Greg, you have the honors.
All right. You ready?
Yeah.
This happened to me tonight. I take the BTS home, the SkyTrain, and when the SkyTrain doors open, there are little arrows on the ground that point where the train is where the door is going to open, and the arrows are on the left side and the right side, and that's where you stand. But on the outside of that, there's a second set of arrows where you are supposed to stand. Now, a lot of times, most times, what happens is there will be one lineup behind an arrow and another lineup of people on the other side of the door.
Right.
And then when that line gets a little bit too long, you have some people that go right to the front of the line, but stand on the second set of arrows.
Yeah.
I think that's cheating.
They double park.
And then they squeeze onto the train at the same time as the people who are at the front of the first set of arrows.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. I despise, I loathe that, unless I'm really in a hurry. And then I might have been known
in my favor, then I'm all for it.
I'm a little opportunistic about some of those things. But yes, by and large, I am with you. I do not, those were not designed to be two lanes. They were, I mean, that's, and unless you're like the super busy ones, right? Or what I hate it is when they do double up, like sometimes when you're leaving like Siam Station, for example, which you experience twice a day because you have to get off there.
Yeah.
That's, if not the one of the busiest stops. I mean, it's the interchange. It's where the two lines cross. So it's likely the Grand Central Station of Bangkok. And that's about as bad as it gets. And if you're unfortunate enough to be there on either of the rush hours, it just sucks. And you're just going, well, you'll actually be sucked into wherever the crowd is going. If you're not, you may not go where you wanted to go. Take some time to get there. But you get that double line that builds up, and then you get the people that go 3 and 4 and just kind of glom onto it to where like we just stopped doing lines. Ugh. We now just have blobs of people on the edges. So yeah, clearly in the loathe camp of that, again, unless I'm really in a hurry.
Yeah, I loathe it too. And talking about how much I've changed, the one thing that hasn't changed is my Canadianness, because I'm still too polite to jump to the front of the line. I'm always at the back going like, oh, these assholes in the front. Sure. So yeah, I loathe it. I think people should just line up nicely and politely and orderly.
Yep. Take your time, people. Take your breath. There's another train coming in like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Calm down. It'll be okay. Hey, Greg, I don't know if you noticed or not, but we received a new review on iTunes.
Oh, that's cool.
Yes, we got a new review, and when those come in, I like to read them. We got this one back on October 30th, and it was from Mark in Texas, who gave us the requisite number of stars. That's 5.
That's out of 5, right?
5 out of 5, 5 out of perfect, 5 out of Mark. Amazing.
Thanks,
5 out of wonderful. Thank you, Mark in Texas. Here's what he says. He says, I love listening to this crazy podcast. I have a special interest in Thailand, and Greg and Evo have a way of growing on you, kind of like moss. Anyhow, he didn't say that. I listen as I drive 30 minutes back and forth to work every day. Thanks, guys. Well, thank you, Mark. If you were driving 30 minutes back and forth every day at our house, you would get right across upon Taksin Bridge.
Yeah, maybe.
You get to the Surasek BTS, and you turn around and come back home.
300 meters. Oh, God. Oh, well.
So anyhow.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Mark. That's really cool. And thank you again, Moss Miner, who was our patron supporter at the top of the show. And if you would like us to say nice things about you on the show, or you just want to get the show early, as well as access to some special patron-only bonus content, head to patreon.com/Bangkok Podcast to lend us your support. We really do appreciate it. And thanks to you for listening to the Bangkok podcast. If you want to reach out to us with an idea or just to get something off your chest or say hello, you can use the contact form on bangkokpodcast.com, or you can reach out to me on Twitter, where I am BKK Greg.
If you're not big on forums and you like the internet, like social media things, you can send us a message on the Facebook, on the Twitter, or online. We're Bangkok Podcast on all of those platforms. You can leave us comments. You can ask us questions. You can say nice things about us. We promise to read every single one of them and reply back. We're both pretty good about replying to those almost as soon as they come in. For Greg Jorgensen, I am Evo Terra. We'll be back next week with more stories of our lives lived in the City of Angels, right here on the Bangkok Podcast. Chok di krap. One more sip, and I'm ready.
Probably doesn't know why I'm hot. Doesn't mean sipping a cup of boiling hot
I know,
tea. That doesn't help
hot.
either.
Yeah, probably should have
I wonder
done
why I'm so hot.
iced mint tea next time, dumbass, not hot.
Yeah.